Okay, I apologize for the technical issues that we have had with the audio, but my name is Christy McLaughlin, and I am a board member with ATI. We are going to get started right now, and I am so sorry for the delay, but thank you for joining us for the bus familiarization webinar. We have just a couple of housekeeping items, and then we'll get you right straight into the session. And again, I'm sorry that we're starting a little bit late. The webinar is being recorded and will be archived in the members only section of the ATI website. We'll have that up for you within the next few days. And then just a note that all of the participant lines are muted for the session today. So you won't be able to ask questions over the phone, but we will, however, take questions and comments in two ways. You can either put them into the chat section of the webinar room, or there's a Q&A section as well in the webinar room. I'll monitor both of those, and you'll be able to ask questions or post your comments that way. But also, please remember that the chat section, if you choose to use that, is public, and the other participants will be able to see your questions and comments. So just in case. And then next slide, Julie. So in case you're unaware, for those of you that signed up as members, then you are aware, but if you are signed up as a non-member, we do encourage you to consider signing up to be a member of ATI. The website to do that is on your screen. There are currently 3 levels of membership: individual, which is $50 for the year; organizational, which is $110, and then an associate membership. The $50 individual membership is well worth every penny. You get lots of additional opportunities for training, and just as with this webinar, it would be free as a member. You also get discounted and a website is member only, such as resources and additional ways to connect with other travel trainers. So please consider doing that if you aren't a member already, and certainly if you have questions, feel free to call or email, and we'll be happy to answer any of those for you. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn the session over to Julie Dupree. Julie is a past ATI board member, as well as travel training and other topic areas. And so Julie's going to talk to us about what travel training is, and do a little bit of clarification so that we know just exactly what
Great. Thank you so much, Christy. Thank you, everybody, for the time today. I'm happy to be with you all and see so many familiar names. As Christy mentioned, my name is Julie Dupree. I am formerly with Easter Seals. I have been working in the travel training arena now for about 9 years. Came from the community level, running a program in Maryland, and then got involved with Easter Seals. Was there about 5 years, and currently I am doing transportation and employment consulting. My background before travel training was in employment services, so I am trying to tie those things together and work to kind of help bridge the gap between employment needs of nonprofit agencies supporting people with disabilities and older adults, and certainly transportation is such a piece of that. So thank you again for having me today, and I'm going to spend just a little time talking about what travel training is and a brief overview. Many of you already know, but I think especially before we get deeper into this session, a recap of how travel training looks across the country, how some communities are innovating travel training services with limited budgets and things of that nature. So in short, travel training is the professional activity of teaching individuals with disabilities and seniors or older adults how to access their environment and community and use public transportation independently. And so, I'm sure all of you are very well aware of the critical link between, access to, for lack of a better term, getting around, being able to get out there and have access to the environment through transportation, and, anything else, medical appointments or community needs, shopping, just being an active part of one's own community is really transportation dependent. And that's why I think travel trainers are some of the best people, because you're really working to provide more at the end of the day than just learning how to use public transportation. It's everything that comes as a result of being able to be active and independent within one's own community. And to that, there are lots of specialized skills that you're probably doing every day, or if you're a new trainer, you're learning how to do. But travel training, the act of teaching travel instruction, requires a pretty extensive knowledge of human development and behavior. You're constantly assessing, how people learn, the different types of skills to teach people, different ways you can have those skills stick, going back to the drawing board to design new methods. And so again, that human development and behavior piece is critically important. You're also working with travel-related concepts and skills, so the whole environment and everything you're dealing with street crossing and riding the bus and everything that encompasses your environment. Public transportation services, you're having to get to know in a pretty in-depth manner the kind of services your community or your city offers. Maybe that's one service, or perhaps you're networking and you're going out and learning, 4 or 5 different regional systems and all of the different, components that would fall under that as well. Pardon me. You're also learning about the natural, and you're teaching about the natural and the built environment. So the challenges that come with some natural elements of navigating one's environment, as well as everything that's added to that natural environment that we build, and sometimes you're out there as a travel trainer questioning, why an engineer would have ever done the kind of thing that you are experiencing or that you're having to teach someone how to navigate with. So certainly lots of elements there. Paths of travel, so talking about accessibility, teaching the hands-on strategies for navigating different paths of travel, getting to your location, getting back safely, coming up with those plan Bs and Cs and everything that goes into providing excellent travel instruction. And then lastly, the interaction of all these dynamics. It's easy to put bullets on a slide and think about, okay, now we'll talk about path of travel, but what you're really doing out there, and anyone who's doing the boots on the ground travel training, every day, is what you're experiencing is all of these things kind of interacting simultaneously. You're making those judgment calls, and to complicate it even more, this is different for every person we work with. It's someone you work with one day, these things come together in one fashion, and then it's a completely different ball game the next day that you're working with someone else, or later that day, or whatever your particular schedule is like. But in general, when we take all of these things together, it ultimately comes down to travel training being the professional application by professionals of a code of ethics, guiding principles, methods of teaching, strategies of teaching, and emerging best practices. And that altogether is travel training. There are competencies for the practice of travel instruction and travel training. These were developed in a collaboration with Easter Seals Project Action years ago, and ATI as well. And they are now housed on the National Aging and Disability Transportation Center website. You can download a copy of them for free at nadtc.org. So if you're running a program, or you're training staff, or you are trying to boost your competency level, it's a great resource for outlining the competencies that a travel trainer or a travel instructor needs to provide excellent training. So it provides guidance on the various competencies that are essential for people who are practicing travel training and teaching those critical skills. It also compiles key guidelines, and it outlines fundamental abilities that a professional needs to be effective with travel training and providing that instruction. There's also sample job descriptions for easy reference. So, if you've inherited a job, or you're creating a new job, or, of people that I've met throughout the years that say, okay, I'm a travel trainer. What's that? What do I do with that? And they have these great backgrounds, but it's maybe their first travel trainer role. And so, the sample job descriptions can often help with those competencies and recruiting competent staff from the disability or aging or recreational therapy fields, or whatever your particular elements of your program are. There are some great job descriptions that can help, find those people and help boost your competence as well. And again, that can all be downloaded at nadtc.org. So the definition of travel instruction is, and this is the ATI definition here, it is the array, continuum, or family of services offered to individuals with disabilities, seniors, and others who need assistance to increase their mobility and travel on public transportation independently. And this is a pretty broad definition, and the reason it is such is that it includes a variety of plans, methods, and strategies that are currently being used every day by professional travel trainers to increase the independent travel skills of the people they serve. And if I could sum that sentence up in an easier manner, what I would say is, travel training looks different depending on what community you're in. New York City, lots of great resources, subways, buses, lots of different options. Things come more often in a city. So a travel training program in New York City is going to look, vastly different from the rural town of Terrell, Texas, that has, 3 routes a day that run through town and connect with larger systems an hour and a half away. So travel training really does look different depending on where you are located, the nature of your services, whether you're rural or urban or somewhere in between, or maybe all 3. And then also, what you're providing, what your resources are. So there are some guidelines that really can be applied no matter, where you are training. Certainly, we want to make sure we're providing good quality instruction and, transit familiarization. Some methods of that might be similar in a big place or a little place, but ultimately, the definition, I think, is great, since it does acknowledge that it's a variety of methods, variety of plans and strategies, and it's pretty specific to what you are doing. The specific services included as part of travel training are orientation, familiarization, and travel training, and I'll break these down here. So for orientation, that is a group or individual activity that is conducted for the purpose of explaining transportation systems or options, maybe explaining services available to address someone's individual transportation needs. This also can sometimes look like the use of maps and schedules for trip planning resources, explaining a fare system, maybe some training on how to use a mobility device while boarding, riding, and exiting a vehicle, information on vehicle features or transportation benefits. This is often your general overview, perhaps introducing someone to your system for the first time, just providing a baseline of support and transportation education so really somebody can orient themselves to your system. Familiarization is a bit deeper than orientation, and that is usually delivered to an individual. Sometimes we see it with small groups. It might be an activity that focuses on facilitating the use of transportation systems. A travel trainer might accompany somebody on a new mode of transportation, or just go a little deeper than transportation orientation. That could be printing out the plan or explaining features of usability of a bus or a train, and really just kind of like the title suggests, familiarizing somebody with the system that is available to them, and perhaps providing a general overview and some travel training assistance to that person or small group. So often when we hear the term travel training, what the classic definition is, and it's kind of evolved to encompass those community-specific elements as well, but often what we think about is one-on-one short-term instruction that is provided to someone who's previously traveled independently. Maybe they need additional training or additional support to learn how to use a different mode of travel. Perhaps they have some background in training, but you're teaching them how to use a different route, or learn how to travel to a new place, or there's a change in the route, and so you're going back to work on, a transfer or something that needs to happen. So that's one part of it is, someone's coming to you with some background experience, and you're, teaching them something different. And then the other part, and I think this is what we see a lot of in the one-to-one setting, is a specially and comprehensive designed instruction in the skills and behaviors that are necessary for independent travel on public transportation provided to an individual who does not have independent travel concepts or skills to go from point A to point B and then from point B back to point A. So this is where we're teaching people skills that are necessary. In my time providing travel training in the field, I worked with a lot of people who, were coming fresh out of high school or, wanting to use the bus instead of having mom or dad or a caregiver drive them places. And, so it would be people or, other folks in different community settings saying, hey, I got a job and now I need to learn how to get there because I don't really have access to reliable transportation. So teaching somebody with, very limited or maybe no background in independent travel, those concepts from scratch, and then building up to the point that hopefully through your training and their practice and you're working together, that person transitions to being a successful traveler in their community and getting to where they need to go. So that's just a little bit about the background of how we've defined travel training. It's evolved over the years. That's currently where it is. The only other thing I would mention before I turn it over to Christy is mainly just focusing on, the kind of best practices that are happening across the country. We're seeing a lot of travel training programs evolve as financial elements evolve and funding for programs evolve, and so some really neat strategies, especially coming out of some really rural areas where I think even as short as 5 years ago, some places would say, oh, we can't really do anything with travel training. We're seeing a lot of, teaming up with other organizations or comprehensive approaches to helping a particular person. And so there's a lot of energy around travel training, and it'll be neat to see it continue to evolve, certainly under this professional definition and professional practice. So I'll turn it over to Christy.
All right, thank you, Julie. And Julie, if you could stop sharing your screen and we'll have Patty start sharing her screen and we'll get switched over. Thank you so much. So now that we have a really clear idea of what travel training is and the types of travel training that can be provided, the rest of the presentation today, we are going to be focusing on that bus familiarization part of travel training. And Patty's program is really great and provides a lot of useful tools, and she's come up with some really innovative ideas for a program that that doesn't necessarily have a lot of the high-tech stuff that some transit agencies have. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Patty and let her get started.
Thank you, Christy. Good afternoon. My name is Patty Wakovich, and I am the travel trainer with the Greater Attleboro Regional Transit Authority in Massachusetts. And I want to thank both Julie and Christy today, as well as ATI, to give me the opportunity to show you some of the travel training tools that I've developed, most specifically for rural or less than urbanized areas. Can you all hear me okay? Am I speaking up? If not, just let me know. Okay.
We can hear you just fine, Patty.
Okay. So to give you an overview of, oh, I think I have the wrong one up, unfortunately. This is the wrong one. Let's see. This is after. This is one of the samples. Let's see if I can find it. Just bear with me for one moment. This is actually the wrong slide. This is something that I was going to show you afterwards. Let's see.
Patty, do you want me to pull it up?
I just got it.
Okay.
All right. Here we are. All right. The one that I was showing was one of the samples, but I wanted to give you all an overview of it. So basically, to start again, the group familiarization classes that I have instructed have been mostly in rural areas. So to give you an
Patty, you have to share your screen again.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
That's okay. Here, I'll go ahead and pull it up, Patty, and you could just tell me when to switch slides.
Okay, I think that will work better. So it's the introduction one. I'll close the other one.
Okay, it should be up. You should be ready to go.
Okay. So this is the second slide. So basically, for those of you who aren't from Massachusetts, Massachusetts operates 15 transit authorities, and we're just one of the transit authorities in Massachusetts, not including the MBTA. GATRA specifically operates 24 fixed bus routes in 19 communities. Today, my primary focus is on the coastal towns, and those on this map are to the far right. And the reason why I'd like to focus on those is those are the areas in which it's either less than urbanized population of 50,000 or it's somewhat rural. And I'll go into a little bit more about why I have developed these tools as I present this to the travel tools. And after that, I'll show you, if time permits, some of the travel tools that I've developed. But I feel that it's important for me to explain how the tools were developed and for why some of the bells and whistles that other transit authorities that live in more urban areas probably take for second, they have them all the time, whereas we don't have them here in these particular areas of the coastline. Okay, so the next slide. Okay, so the primary focus for the group familiarization that I've done up to this point is ages 14 to 60. The seniors, for the most part, are happy with having one introduction class and followed by a bus trip, whereas the first three categories, private school and day programs, special education, and the transitional program that sometimes is part of the school district, other times it's operated by a private school. Those are the areas which I've mostly concentrated on in these rural areas. The next slide. I just wanted to make note that we do have a website where students who are able to utilize technology a little bit more, they can also have the opportunity to use the schedules that are on our website, download the schedules, or if they have Wi-Fi, they can look at them in the map. We also have a page at our website. Okay, so the group familiarization classes really depend on numerous factors. For the most part, usually the group familiarization runs anywhere between 6 to 8 weeks. The in-classroom is usually 1 to 1.5 hours because their focus level after an hour and a half, I start to lose them. And the on the bus and off the bus training can range anywhere between 2 to 4 hours. Now, I've found that the classes that are hands-on in the community and riding the buses are the best and most beneficial for these students. But there are factors that I try to customize the group familiarization classes to the population of students, the number of students that are partaking in the class, what their cognitive or physical deficits are. Sometimes they can group them so that not one student, or they have teachers or paraprofessionals to help them to keep them up with the other kids, then that's also, has worked quite well. The time constraints, especially in the high schools, sometimes don't allow for 2 to 3 bus trips during the group familiarization. So that all depends on how much they actually grasp when I'm doing these introduction courses. And then finally, the geographic location. Not all the training sessions that I do have the ability or the time to drive from one particular location, which isn't on the bus route, to a designated stop. So all of those depend on how long the classes will be and how many trips they'll take in the 6 to 8 week course. Next slide, please. Okay, this I just wanted to give you a little bit more overview of the map that I showed you previously, just so that you'd understand the bus routes that I'm primarily focusing on the far right. If you notice the far right of the coastline, the northern part is the towns of Pembroke, Marshfield, Duxbury, and Kingston. Now that is known as the SAIL, which is the Seaside Area Interlink. And that is one bus route having 14 designated stops. And it basically just travels northbound to southbound, and it's about an hour and 20 minutes traveling back and forth each day, going northbound from Kingston back to Pembroke, turning around, and then going southbound. Whereas if you notice the red star Kingston, that's the middle point where the SAIL meets up with the Plymouth Area Link buses. Now the Plymouth Area Link buses, there's 4 fixed bus routes. And being that it's a historic community, they have named the buses with the same theme, or at least 4 of the buses. One is called the Liberties, the other is the Freedom, those travel in downtown, and the Mayflower that goes out further, if you notice where Manomet is. And then there's a deviated link that travels all the way to Cedarsville. Now, many of you might not know, unless you're from Massachusetts, that Plymouth is the largest town in Massachusetts. It's 134 miles. It's also one of the largest towns on the coastline in Massachusetts. So you can see that although, many of you have probably come and seen the Mayflower or Plymouth Rock, and that is fairly urbanized. But traveling 134 miles, you can see how it could potentially go to rural and less than urbanized areas. And that's why I've had to be inventive, or one of the reasons why I've had to be inventive in travel instruction, because the naming conventions are based on themes. So they're not simple as, let's take bus 5 inbound and outbound. So can you change the next slide? Okay, the other factor with travel training in these areas is the buses vary. You see the middle slide, that's one of the Gasser buses, and that's probably the size bus that many of you are accustomed to. It has all the bells and whistles, it has the digital display, it has the automated vehicle locators, it has the push buttons, it has everything. Whereas the other buses that surround the middle bus vary, okay, based on the geographical location that they're traveling. It also depends on the time of day. If the demand for ridership is more busy time in the afternoon or the morning, the bus could actually change from a larger bus to a smaller bus or vice versa. Or they might just have smaller buses because the area that they're traveling in, they couldn't fit a larger bus in that particular stop. The changes can happen daily. They can happen in the morning and then be a different bus in the afternoon. So when I'm doing travel training, I always have to be prepared when we take these bus trips or have a backup plan. So not always knowing whether or not there'll be all the, quote, bells and whistles. Although the bus drivers make the bus stop announcements, these buses also are loud when you're traveling. And sometimes you have consumers talking. So I'm trying to teach a group of students. So if they have a picture book, which is one of the travel training tools that I utilize along with teaching them or having the bus make the announcements as we stop at each stop. It helps them and helps them focus. Okay, the next slide, please. Okay, I think you have to click this, Julie, to make it work. Okay, here we go. So as I mentioned, they have the Freedom and Liberty in downtown Plymouth. This is basically the same bus that operates simultaneously going in the opposite direction. So when I'm trying to train them, it's pretty much two different names, but going inbound and outbound at the exact same time. And many times the buses will pass each other at Industrial Park. So that's a hard concept, even for visitors that are coming for the first time to visit that want to use the bus, let alone anyone that might have some type of disability or cognitive issue that makes it difficult for them to understand. This is one of the PowerPoint slides that I often use when I'm doing the in-classroom instruction before we actually go out on the bus, and I introduce them to the bus stops and the landmarks. Next slide. Okay, so I had told you that also we cover the northern part of the coastline, and there's one fixed bus route, 14 designated stops. It takes about an hour and 20 minutes. So for the ease of showing you the travel training tools, even though I've made similar tools in the Plymouth area, my primary focus is on the Seaside Area Interlink going northbound. Northbound starting in Kingston, which is the central point where it turns around. And also Kingston is where the Freedom and Liberty buses also travel to, so that consumers can transfer to other parts of the coastline if they so desire. Next slide, please. Okay, I think you have to click this too. Yeah, there we go. So I just wanted to show you that my focus will be going northbound from Kingston Collection. And out of the 14 designated stops, unfortunately, there are only 4 GATRA bus signage at these designated stops. So the picture book helps in that at these stops, they want to know where they need to wait to pick up the buses. Okay, so by traveling and getting familiar with the area and the landmarks, it's most beneficial when we take our first bus trip in the class. The other thing is, I didn't mention this, but GATRA operates on a flag stop policy. So that makes it even more important that they understand their surroundings and whether the bus is traveling northbound or southbound, as well as being able to gauge the arrival time of the bus if they have to pinpoint or guesstimate between 2 designated stops. The other thing is if you notice where it says on the left, Marshfield High School and Middle School, the bus travels by that area. It's considered a designated stop during those times, but actually the bus travels by there all day long, so that students or middle school students or high school students, they can take the bus throughout the day, not just at those designated times that are listed here. Next slide, please. So that is basically why I developed these training tools. So just to rehash what I just went over, it's bus signage or shelters at designated stops are not always at each stop, or they vary from stop to stop. Now, I would love to say that we would be able to place a GATRA bus signage at all our stops, but there's a lot of red tape, especially in these rural and urban areas. You have to get permission, and it's not as easy as just saying, can we put up a GATRA sign, so that the folks or the consumer will know exactly where to stand. The landmark identification is very important, being that we don't have GATRA signage everywhere, and also because we utilize the flag stop policy. And then the lack of developed infrastructure at intersections, crosswalks, curb cuts to practice safety skills. That's another tool that I've developed because in the rural areas, you may not have even a crosswalk or a lighted intersection. No crosswalks, you don't have curb cuts. So I often encourage the students to go into downtown Plymouth or to a more urban area to practice their safety skills so that they're best prepared when they're going to utilize public transportation in the area that they actually reside in or go to school, or in other communities throughout Massachusetts or just in the United States in general. And then finally, the buses that operate a fixed route may not always be the same or have the most advanced technology. And that's basically the bells and whistles, the digital display, the size of the bus, and so forth. Next slide. So that's what led me to creating an information center. And I had taken an Easter Seals workshop back in 2006 to get a little bit of ideas how I could best approach working in less than urbanized areas or rural areas for travel instruction. So I had gotten the idea that building a library or information center to help these local educational agencies or rehabilitation and vocational agencies, that might be neat, not only for my instruction when I'm doing the group familiarization, but also so that they could also utilize the tools after the class is over so they could further instruct these students that are just beginning in high school or transitional, or those that belong to day programs, as well as I have teachers in different school districts that just ask to look at my exercises to give them ideas for their own curriculum because they have their own travel training program. So they help me with their specialty, and I help them with my specialty or my primary focus as working in the transit authority. And that's why I've spent a lot of time focusing on how to best have the student understand the landmarks, the location, how to ride the bus. And a real challenge has been how to teach them in classroom when it's only an hour and a half, maybe 2 sessions maximum, on how to fully understand how to read the bus schedule. And at the end, I'm hopeful that at least they have enough understanding so that they can plan their own bus trip. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so this is the Dropbox where it has the different samples. And let me just take a look here. I'd like to go in and show you some of those sample training tools that I've made. And then if any of you are interested in getting a link to these so that you could also look at them, please email me at pwakovich@gacha.org. Okay.
You should be able to share your screen now, Patty, so that you can share those.
Okay. Okay. Is this workable now? Okay.
Yes, you
see
your screen.
All right. So the first one that I'd like to show you is the picture books that I had mentioned to you. Okay. Now, of course, I can't show you a hard copy of the picture book, but I can give you an idea. Okay. So let's say we are into week 3 of the travel instruction program. They've been introduced to that it's a flag stop. They've been introduced how to pay, and now they're taking a ride just to get familiar with traveling from on the Seaside Area Link from northbound all the way to southbound. Okay, so we have it start with 14 and go backwards just so that they understand that the bus goes in one direction and then it turns around and then goes southbound starting with 1. Okay, that I just developed so that they would understand and be able to follow the picture book a little bit better. So they start, the bus always arrives southbound to the mall and turns around and departs northbound. So in this case, we're leaving northbound, and this Gacha bus signage is just 1 out of the 4 in the Seaside area. It travels actually 4 different towns. That's why it takes so long. It takes 1 hour and 20 minutes. So as the bus is traveling along, sometimes there's no one on the bus. Other times there's multiple people talking with the air conditioner going or just the engine. Sometimes it's very loud. So if they don't have a automated vehicle locator or a digital display to say where the stops are, I make the announcements. I try to show them, and they follow along with the pictures of where to wait. And We do this all the way, okay? The majority of the places along this route are either grocery stores, apartment complexes, libraries, council on aging. For example, this one place, Millbrook Motors, this is just the spot where they're just passing right by. There's an automotive place here. It's a busy intersection, so they need to know which side they would stand on if they're going northbound or southbound, even though there's no signage. So, you know, they're looking out the window. They're trying to find out where the best place to wait. If they live along the route, how they would learn to stand on the appropriate side to either go northbound or southbound. If you notice here, Brant Rock, if any of you followed or are from Massachusetts, you know that last year that is where it got all flooded and there was a lot of problems. This is the coastline where it travels. Right on the right here is the coastline. And it just continues. It goes to apartment complexes. A lot of times are for the elderly. Other times they're for the disabled or the low income. And then the Webster Square, this one is real important because of the simple fact that although it has a GATRA signage, the square is quite large. It goes by the post office, the town hall, a library. So they don't actually have to stand at the signage. So the kids seem to really, be interested in knowing that they get to go on the bus, but also learning these different stops. And finally, we reach the last stop, and the bus turns around to southbound. It stops at either Stop and Shop and Kohl's. We usually try to make a somewhat interesting, take a little break since it's an hour and 20 minutes, and then they just get back on the bus and we go back. However, when we return back, let me see if I can show you. When we return back, usually it's role reversal. I tell them, I'm going to be the student and you're going to make the bus announcements. We play a little game. Sometimes we make groups. Or they can, if they don't want to do that, I give them a worksheet. They can put the dots on the map as they're traveling so that they can look at their picture book, because I have a picture book both for southbound and northbound, and do that. So I really try to get them to know the area, and so that when we go back to the class the following week and I introduce them to how to read the bus schedule, at least when I'm talking about rows and columns and how it is actually a timetable matrix, they pretty much can identify with the stops that we're talking about, and it makes a lot more sense. Because I've tried various ways, hands-on tools, all different things, but because a lot of them have fine motor issues, having them write out the matrix or have them do that, it's one, time consuming, and two, it's not as beneficial. So that's why I even made another picture book that has columns on it so that they can grasp the concepts of columns versus rows. But I want to show you a few other things prior to that. And then if I have time, I'll show you the column picture book. So as I had mentioned previously, a lot of these areas are rural. So we'll do a PowerPoint presentation on the traffic signs and symbols and the coloring and the meanings of the signs and symbols so that they'll be able to get a better understanding of why symbols and why, as a pedestrian walking in the community, you still should be able to identify and understand these particular symbols. Now, some of the people trying or working towards getting their learner's permit. So many times the instructors love that I spend a little more time on this than probably other transit area authorities that do introduction classes may. But up to this point, they've found it quite an exercise that they like to do quite often. So we just go through these. I don't have a lot of time, and you all know the symbols and everything. That there's black and white, there's black, white, and red that mean various things. We spend a lot of time on the yellow general warning only because it's rural areas and less than urbanized, and there's quite a few warning signs in that area, as well as those that are the school zone, okay? Because a lot of times, in fact, if the bus does go by the school area, there's quite a few signs that relate to school. But I have developed an exercise so they can go downtown Plymouth where it's more urbanized and there's a lot of signs, even more above and beyond, let's say, the community of Marshfields where the high school is. There's a rotary in downtown. There's dead ends. There's not a railroad, but there's plenty of other different things. Here is one that we focus on a great deal, is the tractor, the deer crossing, the horse crossing, and I try to let them know, you'll see in this picture, the differences between city and rural areas, that if there's no sidewalks, they have to face the traffic and walk single file. But the warning sign for the bicycle, that sign you might see both in urban and city areas. You have to be looking out for winding roads and so forth. So these are PowerPoints that I've shown others in the area that like to use this for their own programs. And then the construction always varies from downtown, so they have to find those themselves, because one given day they're in one area and the next they're in another. And then everyone always likes the blue signs, you know, because then we get on the subject of vacation and historic Plymouth and so forth, as well as they're all quite interested in knowing where the hospital is and the medical healing. And they're all pretty much understanding the concept of ADA and wheelchair accessible. So we make sure that they understand their rights riding on the bus, and that we offer all types of ways to help people that are in wheelchairs or in canes, how to get on and off the bus safely, above and beyond using a dial-a-ride service. This is the fixed bus, so that they fully understand the difference. And then we just talk a little bit about the green signs, following the directions. Even if they're not driving, they could find and locate these in the event that they got off at the wrong stop, so they could identify where they are. And I make note that sometimes the bike signs, at least in Massachusetts, I don't know if in other areas they change. One area is green, another's black, one's yellow. I'm not quite sure why, but that's the case. That this safety first, you could even see in a building, and the stairway you could see in a parking garage when we talk about safety. And finally, because part of the area where I have them do a safety walk for practicing their pedestrian skills is historic, they look for some of these brown signs for recreation, historic, or scenic signs. These orange round signs, those are on some of our literature. So we just reiterate what is appropriate when you're riding on the bus. Although we do have the ADA accessible right outside the door, and we have the yield sign inside the buses, so they can pinpoint those and fully understand. And then the final slide, we talk about the lighted crosswalks, even though many of them have seen these. A lot of the lighted crosswalks in Massachusetts, not all of them have the most recent or the best kind, where the hand flashes and it shows you the amount of time you have to safely cross the street. So we talk about those. And then down below, a lot of the areas where they either go to school or they live, there is no lighted crosswalk. So we talk about the zebra crosswalk, or the one with the white lines, or no crosswalk at all. But in downtown Plymouth, in certain areas near Marshfield High School, there's a one right there for them to practice. Let's see. How much time do I have left, Christy?
You're good. I mean, you can go another 10 or 15 minutes if you wanted.
Okay, great. Okay, great. All right. So I will show you the exercise after they learn sign and symbols. If time permits, they can take another ride on the bus, or if time doesn't permit for them, sometimes the teachers will do this exercise on their own, and I give the exercise to the instructor, and they take a trip right down either to Marshfield area or downtown. So let's see. All right, so I usually give them this just to reiterate the colors to refresh their memory, so they know what they're looking for when either they go downtown or they go to a less than urbanized area of Marshfield. And they have, I call it a bingo board, but it's just basically a grid that has many of the signs, not all the signs that they'll find in downtown Plymouth. And so they take a walk and they try to identify these signs, and also think about why these signs were placed where they were. So it's kind of like to have them practice what they learned in the classroom. And this is just a form to help the instructors or staff know exactly where they will find these signs, except for the orange signs because construction changes all the time. And then I developed, I used the Google map and I placed the signage where they'll find it, because one part of downtown Plymouth is on the coast, on the waterfront where the Mayflower and Plymouth Rock is, and the other side is the shopping. But they can break into two groups, or they can do the whole entire loop. There is enough time to do it. It takes maybe 40 minutes maximum. So, and on each end of downtown Plymouth, there's a lighted crosswalk for them to practice. And sometimes, depending on the consumers that I'm teaching, sometimes this is also a game that they like to do to see who can find more of the signs than others. And there's plenty of places to stop for lunch. So we try to make them engaged, try not to make it so that they start to lose their focus level, give them enough time to take a break. And so far, this has been quite an exercise that many of the local education agencies and day programs have utilized and liked. And then this is just the same format, but it's near Marshfield High School, that shows where exactly the signage is. This is an example where the bikes are black and the bike signs are black rather than yellow. And then this is the same board, it just has a few other things on it. Not all the signs they'll find, because I wanted them to be able to, pinpoint which ones were, and if all the signs were there, it wouldn't be as much of a challenge for them. And then this just shows the location of traveling northbound or southbound where it passes by Marshfield High School, and to show you that one side of the area, traveling southbound, which is traveling towards the Kingston Collection Mall, they would wait, even though it's on the bus schedule, between 7 a.m. and 2:26. That side of the area, there's no crosswalks, okay? Whereas if they were traveling northbound back to Pembroke, there's a crosswalk for them to flag the bus down. Now, I always tell them that they should still flag the bus regardless if they're at a designated stop, especially at grocery stores, at Stop and Shop, because there's other people coming out of Stop and Shop or grocery stores that might be waiting for someone to pick them up. So one of the number one rules is they have to make eye contact and put their hands up regardless if it's at a designated stop, unless it's a place like the Kingston Collection Mall where that's the end point and start of another stop. And then this is just the bus schedule, and I just wanted to show you how this is the times of the day that it passes by to stop at the high school or middle school. And then this is traveling southbound when it turns around at Stop and Shop Kohl's and travels all the way back to the mall. It's called it used to be called Independence Mall, but now it's called Kingston Collection. Okay, and then now if they can't take the trip, or that's not something that they're interested in, they prefer to practice the information that I've provided on how to ride GATRA. They can't take as many bus trips. Maybe they only can take one final bus trip. Some of them like to play some of the games that I've provided. Now, two of the games that I've provided were developed using PowerPoint. But what I've found is I try to engage them with me not just standing up there talking, but them actually doing things in the in-classroom sessions. So the PowerPoint, you can actually use the PowerPoint presentation and nothing else if that's what you desire. But what I do is I have two types of games. One is GATRA Trivia, which is similar to Jeopardy. The other is Spin and Win. Okay, so I'll show you Spin and Win first. Spin and Win, you actually need to get a wheel so that they're able to use a wheel to find out how many points they will be able to use when they pick a category. So there's 4 categories with 5 different questions that they can choose. So they would spin the wheel, say they got 10 points. So when they choose the category, if they get that correct, then they win 10 points. So let's say we choose that. It says explain the traffic signs and symbols. Okay, so if they answer that correctly, they would get 10 points. And then you'd click on the spin, and you notice this is turns a different color so that you know that that one has been already chosen. Colors, orange signs. Now this is the other thing. I have put on the Dropbox all the signage if you want to print it out and laminate it, or you could just have a board that had certain kinds of signs so that they could point to it. Or you could develop your own PowerPoint and actually put the signs and just word it differently so that you wouldn't need other tools. But I like to make it interactive. They like to spin the wheel. They like to walk over to the table and find the signs. And the teachers like it to be more interactive as well. So the orange signs, there would be all kinds of different signs that are on the table, and they would have to find the construction sign. Okay, in the community, an example of that, okay, what yellow signs may you observe when taking a ride in rural settings? And then they would look, and they usually find the farm tractor, the deer crossing, the bike sign. I think there was one other, deer crossing, like horse riding. Or they could use the winding road. There's all different ones. And then finally, a bit of GATRA trivia, which is just what we've been training them on, is give us a wave, the flag stop, they have to say what it is. And so there's a bunch of different questions, but I just wanted to show you those. Let me just show you something different. Okay. So then I also give the teacher the key, of course, so that they know the right answer if they wanted to do it on their own. And then the GATRA trivia is Jeopardy, okay? So say you don't have access to PowerPoint, you could actually print these out and laminate them and put them on a board. So put them on a table and do the exact same thing, and they could pick it that way and play the game that way. Okay, so this particular one, the only thing that I haven't mastered, and I've talked to other people that use similar games to mine, is how to make it so once you deface it or the color changes so you know you've used it, you have to get out entirely out of the PowerPoint presentation to restart. You have to get out entirely, even though you exit out. Even though you get out of the screen, you have to exit out and then go back in. So if any of you ever work on this and figure out that little piece, I would be more than happy to hear how you do that. So here, rather than having a spin, they're just picking the number, and that's the points. They would get 30 points if they answered this correctly. And then in this case, I have this home icon, which brings it back. And this is what I would recommend. If you want to customize them to your own area, always save a copy, because when if you mess up when you're leaving one slide and going into another, it's not going to change color like this. So if any of you have any questions, please give me a call or email me. And then here's the colors. And the other thing is these GATRA trivia and spin and win, although some of the questions are the same, this one is a little more advanced, a little harder than the spin and win. But the questions, are similar. So you could actually play both of these games if you'd like to. And they like doing this too. And the majority of them like to win prizes too. So we have like little trinkets of GATRA, ponchos for the rain, and different things that sometimes we're able to give them, whatever team wins the best, or wins, I should say, not the best. And then the last is we even have trivia about the bus schedule and true and false questions. Okay, so that's So that's that, and let's see what else I have here. Then after they've played the games, like I told you that we focus on how to read the bus schedule. Okay, so this is one of the slides so that I can try to get them understanding all the pieces of the bus schedule so that they'll read it and the reasons why. Okay, the cover page, the contact information, the map and how it goes along with the stops along the route, the designated stops, the pricing for students versus full fare, and how to prepare for a bus ride, making sure that they have the most effective date because bus schedules do change. If they're able to look at the website, sometimes we'll practice downloading the schedule onto their phone. And then I've basically broken out the bus schedule so they understand columns and rows and put the numbers in so that they could get the concept of how you read a bus schedule from the rows left to right, the columns up and down. And then our bus schedules, the colors in many areas are one color for the morning and a different color in the afternoon. Some of our schedules are, they have a separate section for Saturday versus weekdays. Others just have, like, especially the Liberty and Freedom, they just have little stars next to the starting point, which is later on Saturdays and ends shorter or earlier in the evening. And then this is just the southbound where it starts and stops, which I've already told you all this because you've seen. And then we concentrate on trying to understand the columns. And now they know the stops because they've taken a ride, and it makes a little bit more sense. And then they just turn around and go southbound and end back at Kingston Collections. These are the slides that I told you that I use in my presentations a lot of times. I try to make the concept of that if you want to transfer to Plymouth, you transfer at Kingston Collection, or if people from Plymouth want to come over to Marshfield and Duxbury, they would take the sale. Now these are the columns, okay? These are the columns. What I've done is I've taken all the columns from the bus schedule and I've put them on a separate page on the picture book so that when they take another bus trip, or if they only can take the final bus trip, the concept is on the picture book that the column is all the times that the bus throughout the day goes to that particular spot. So if they can get that concept down in conjunction with understanding that you read rows left to right, and when you're reading the row, that's one bus going to all the different times. I don't need to explain that. I don't know why I'm explaining it to you when you all know how to read this bus schedule, but that's the reason, because believe it or not, they have the training I've done, the majority of them, the hardest thing for them to do is to understand and be interested enough to understand how to read the timetable matrix. It could be because of the maturity level, it could be because of their deficit. They just don't have a big desire to really pay attention to the time, unfortunately. Maybe when they get a little older, that's why I have these tools for the teachers to continue to reiterate the information. And then, of course, there's always a payment system. The majority of the pay fares machines are the same, but there's a little bit of like quirks on the pay machine. You can't put 2 quarters in at a time or they get stuck. So we talk about that. I'm sure all transit authorities have their own little areas where you have to you have to know, like, all these little fine details that aren't listed. So the more information you know in advance, because I like them to be prepared as much as possible, the more opportunity they have for a positive bus trip or several bus trips. Then we get into the point of now it's your turn to try to plan a bus trip. And so that's where I have, let's see here, bus trip planning tools, okay? So like I had mentioned before, some of their fine motor skills are difficult for them, Okay, and I had tried to have them make matrices with their hands using whiteboards and using those markers that you can, and it sometimes works and it sometimes doesn't. So I developed these itinerary plans where they could fill in the blanks and follow the bus schedule, or, encircle them and put them in when they're planning, depending on the class. Or I also have made bus schedules in Microsoft Word so that they could mimic them. Now, this is kind of a thing where you have to be very careful, because if you mess up the Microsoft Word table, that's why you should always have a copy of it. It could be a bad thing. So you always want to refer back to the actual schedule on the website or a hard copy. But some of it is, if you print out these large schedules, they can use a highlighter, and sometimes that helps them so they can understand what their bus plans are for a given day. So I have these. You can actually use them in Microsoft Word if they if they know how to highlight. I think it would probably be easier just to print them out and let them highlight them themselves. And then I have developed the understanding of the columns. Like I told you, when it leaves Kingston Collections, it starts at 14. That's just to show them that there's 14 stops and 14 columns, and then the rows. And notice how the colors in the morning are white, and then it's a different color in the afternoon. And on Saturdays, it starts later and earlier. And that brings me to the picture book that I developed for them to practice after they have learned how to read the bus schedule. Okay, so this can go hand in hand with the actual bus schedule now, and it has the columns for each stop that they can look at along the route. And this is fairly a new concept because I've tried all different kinds, but I'm hopeful that this, if they have the opportunity to take 2 bus trips and then a final bus trip, then they might actually have a better opportunity to get the grasp of the timetables. And then the last thing, and this PowerPoint presentation is for those students that understand the difference of when you're kidding around, but you're serious that safety is an important thing. But I've had the opportunity to teach some, especially younger, let's say anywhere between 10th grade to 12th grade, and they like a little humor. So I tried to add it, but at the same time make my point that safety is very important. Okay, and safety is actually important both on and off the bus, and just in being prepared. And because my name's Patty, I use all these little sayings about Patty promotes public safety so that we'll always have positive outcomes. And I don't know if they think I'm goofy or not, but that's my nature. So here we are. This is the last one. Another lecture. Is it all the same? Now, and then I got this saying from Dr. Seuss, I like nonsense, but it wakes up the brain cells. Now this I got from the Transit Authority. My mobility manager had shown this to me, and I loved it. I don't know if it'll actually show up, and some of you might have seen it. This is the one where if they don't understand the concept, or they, I love this. Do I have enough time, Christy, to show this or no?
I think it depends on how long it is, because we're getting about to the Q&A section here.
Okay, so I'll just show a part of it. So that basically, if you want to link that up on your PowerPoint presentation, it just has all kinds of like jokes, but serious, that you can do a lot of dumb things to either be not safe around buses or trains. So the young students get a kick out of that. And then I just go into more detail about how to be prepared, even going into the, that if when you get older, you travel, you have to realize that there's different time zones, making sure that you have your watch, your cell phone is always in place, that you don't carry too much. And then, you know, we reiterate them planning, and then there's a checklist and another exercise that they can work on. And I think that's all of them. Let me just double check 1 second. Yes, that's it, Christy.
All right, Patty, thank you so much. You know, you had mentioned that maybe it was because of their maturity level on reading the schedule, but I honestly think that's the hardest thing for anybody to get. I mean, we're being spoiled nowadays with the online trip planners, but without that option,
That's true.
I do think that reading a schedule is at least one of the most difficult things as far as a concept to grasp. For planning your trip. So, but thank you so much. Really great information. I do have some questions that came in. I'm going to keep watching. So if you still have questions, this is the time to submit those into into the Q&A section or into the chat section. You can send me a message. It's under total instruction, and so send those questions in if you have them. We'll proceed on with the ones we have and take any new ones that come in as time permits. So, so Patty, the first question is, you had mentioned that you provide sometimes only classroom instruction, and how do you decide when you're going to provide classroom instruction and when you're going to do classroom and street instruction?
Well, basically, before I start the classroom instruction, I talk with the instructors to find out the class size, how many staff members they'll have to help, my first question always is, what is your goal in group introduction? And that way they give me a better idea of how many students they'd like and whether or not their schedule would be able to have multiple bus trips or not. Then I develop the syllabus. The teacher looks at it, whether or not it's workable. We actually, most of the time, plan the bus trips in advance, but the final bus trip, it's to be determined because that's the one that they would actually plan themselves. Does that answer the question? So generally, I don't just do in classroom. Usually, the majority of them will at least take one bus trip. But like I said, more than one bus trip is the ideal situation.
Okay. If that questioner needs follow-up, I'm sure they'll submit that. So if something comes in, I'll let you know, but that sounds good to me. So the next question, could you share some of your program statistics? Like how many people do you train per class and how many do you train annually?
I probably could do that, but I don't have the statistics with me right yet. But I can tell you that it's probably, I would say, maybe a maximum of 10 group familiarizations a year, and it ranges, let's say, between 10 students per class of those sessions. I have an attendance sheet that I have developed to track that using an Excel spreadsheet, but that is one area that I haven't spent a lot of time on, is developing the actual statistics of how many. I could give you the participants, but I couldn't give you how many those that participate now are riding the bus independently, because the majority of them, it's a introduction class, and then the teachers or the day programs will pursue it. Or if I continue the program more than the first introduction class, I have had a day program that the same students took it 2 to 3 times, and they were tremendous. One time I actually even gave them a group independent travel training certificate because they had taken it numerous times and they were able to ride the bus. They still had one staff member with them, but I watched them from a distance and they did real well. But a lot of times the teachers, especially in the local education areas, I go in, introduce it one time, and then they either further the program themselves or they use some of the skills that they've learned to teach the next class. But no, I don't have statistics. I could see if I could show them if they want more, but that's basically how many it is per year over the last few years.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. The next question is, it appears like you train a majority of students, but this also sounds like a good program for refugees. So do you train any other populations?
Well, the only populations are those that are in the day programs, which are older, but I have never actually trained refugees. No.
Okay. I'm just trying to look at both places here. That was all the questions we had coming in advance, but let me take a quick look and make sure we're not forgetting anything here or leaving any questions unanswered. All right, I don't see any other questions come in, but Patty, I do have a question. We have a minute for one more question, if you don't mind taking my question. I would love to know. You said that you talk or that you teach sometimes the teachers, and I'm wondering if you have an official Train the Trainer program or if it's really just sort of an unofficial, here's some information and you can use this with your students.
Well, we have a manual that was developed several years ago by the mobility manager. So oftentimes when I develop the course, I also give them the training manual, and so they can follow that guidelines, but we don't have a official Train the Trainer program, no.
Okay, so it's really just providing the information to them so that they can continue to work with the students after you're done.
Right.
Okay, fantastic. Well, I think that's a great idea. I think it would certainly help the students in retaining the information as they move forward. So,
and some of the agencies, if they don't feel that they couldn't do it by themselves, such as certain day programs, I go back multiple times and teach them until they do have staff or enough staff that have gone through the course so that they then feel comfortable doing it on their own. Because a lot of them, are people that are working that don't have as much background in public transportation. So even them partaking in the course for the 6 to 8 weeks, they still don't feel comfortable doing it on their own. So sometimes I go back multiple times.
Okay, great. That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Patty, and thank you, Julie, also for your presentations at the beginning. A lot of really great information provided. We're at the end of the session today. We just have a couple of seconds left before we end. I do want to let you know that I am going to send out an email here in just a few minutes with a link to an evaluation survey. Please take a moment to complete that so that we can use your feedback to improve future ATI sessions. And then finally, I want to thank you for participating today and apologize one more time for the technical audio trouble we had at the beginning. And thank you for sticking around and sticking those few minutes out. But if you have any questions or if there's anything that we can do for you at ATI, please let us know. You can email us at info@travelinstruction.org. And as usual, you can check out the website at travelinstruction.org. We also have Facebook and LinkedIn, so feel free to follow us and join us in those places as well to stay up to date on the activities that the Association of Travel Instruction is involved in currently. So thank you so much for your participation today. We hope that you have a great rest of your day.